and welcome to this seminar. This is Class Size Realities, Evidence, Practice, and Pathways for Learning at Scale. We know that this is a topic that's very important. Our own data from the Global Education Policy Dashboard shows us some very large class sizes. And of course, this raises questions about how and whether the smart buys in education can work in such contexts. So we're delighted to bring together today a group of colleagues who have been thinking and studying and working with large classes for quite some time. I'm now going to move across to Dr. Adrienne Barnstory. Let me introduce her. Adrienne is a literacy and pedagogy specialist at the Learning Systems Institute at Florida State University. And she has spent a lot of time thinking about and being embedded in and studying issues around large classes. She has more than 20 years of experience in formal and non-formal education environments in education research, both in the US but internationally, focusing, I think, on the primary grade curricula, pre-service teacher training, professional development, and so on. So, Adrienne, we're really looking forward to learning a bit more about your in-depth studies and work. And while you're presenting, I'll put some links in the chat for people to check later. Over to you, Adrienne. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you welcoming me to engage in this activity. Today, we're going to talk about some evidence and practices around large class pedagogy. So as an educator, I have spent years searching for evidence on effective teaching and methodologies for classes. And finally, a few years ago, I brought together a team to begin exploring this topic. We began by reviewing the last 25 years of research about large class pedagogy, and it's published in the Journal of Educational Development. Our key research questions were, what instructional techniques are identified in the literature as effective? What strategies can be used for classroom management, and how can teachers effectively conduct assessments and provide feedback performance for these large numbers of learners? And so we started with 14,000 resources on large class pedagogy, but after removing anything that wasn't related to primary or secondary education or that were duplicated, we ended up with less than 100 resources that were relevant for to like what is effective large class pedagogy in primary and secondary schools. And we conducted thematic analysis on these 93 resources to explore the common themes across these global studies. There were 6 major themes that emerged from the literature. Theme 1 was building a classroom community. It makes the class feel smaller. It helps it function well. The emphasis is on student-teacher relationships, enhancing trust and support, and promoting belonging and respect among the peers. The second theme is about effective behavior management. Teachers are encouraged to use proactive, responsive, and positive reinforcement strategies to strengthen those student-teacher connections and the student-student connections. The third theme focused on establishing and training students on regularly utilized classroom routines. Entering and exiting the classroom, distributing materials, how to complete classroom chores, take attendance, how to engage with peers, move in and out of groups, even like what students should do when they finish their work. It's really helpful in multilingual classrooms if these routines are initially taught in a local language and then they're repeated then they move to the other language, and that these are repeated at the beginning of every class or the beginning of every routine until the students know exactly what they're supposed to do and they can carry them out independently. And the teacher must explain the routine, model the routine, and allow the learners to practice this many times. I was a primary school teacher, and as the teachers in this, as we reviewed the literature, and most of it was anecdotal and observational, And as the teachers talked about these classroom routines, it reminded me of a book that I read, 25, 30 years ago called The First Days of School. And it really focuses on how those first couple weeks of school, you're training the students to learn the classroom routines so that when you dive deeply in the content, they know exactly what to do every moment of the day. And I think that this is something that might be missing from teacher education in many LMICs, right? That we're not focusing on how do you train the learners to learn the routines so that your learning process is much more efficient. And then learning formats. Theme 4 was about utilizing a variety of formats, moving between different formats to keep the learners engaged, but it also requires the teachers to really think through their seating plans, to really think through how they're organizing their classroom so that the learners can go from maybe a whole class lesson to a little bit of pair or group work, back to a whole class lesson to independent work, but then also while doing that, that the teacher is differentiating instruction for those learners in a way that's going to help all the learners be learning at a level that's appropriate to them. Theme 5 was about using creative, formative, and summative assessments. And there are a wealth of there's a number of assessments, right? And most summative assessments can also be used as formative assessment. But here's the thing, teachers note that assessment is really challenging. Due to the high number of students and the demands that the system places on teachers to conduct different types of assessments, assessment is a very sensitive topic with teachers. And theme 6 is about resource scarcity and management. The teachers, we're talking about even teacher planning time, teacher instructional time, the number of materials, and the space that the classroom that the teachers have to move around the classroom. So they have to effectively organize their lessons to efficiently use time, materials, and classroom space. And they have to organize those learners in a way that allows everyone to participate and be motivated by the teacher. So after we conducted this review of the last 25 years of research, we decided to conduct some exploratory research, and we visited 47 primary school classrooms across Malawi to learn directly from teachers how they handle these overcrowded classrooms. In our exploratory research, we focused on several research questions, but today I'm focusing on sharing some best practices that we observed, as well as some barriers that teachers identified as inhibiting their ability to utilize the practices that they know are best for instruction. So if you're not familiar with Malawi, in the context of Malawi, there's an average of 120 learners per classroom. The government's goal is 70 per classroom, and there are documented up to 414 learners in classrooms. There's a very high teacher workload, particularly around assessment. There are very few teacher professional development opportunities offered to these teachers, and so I'm sure you're aware that there's going to be very high learning poverty in these classrooms, where you're seeing children that are in grades 3, 4, and 5 that have been in school since they were 5 years old. They're not able to read. They're not able to do simple arithmetic or even read a passage and understand what's happening, even if they can read the words. In our research, we collected both qualitative and quantitative data. And like I said, we visited 47 classrooms in grades 2 and 4. And in the classrooms we observed, there were between 50 and 224 learners present. We video recorded these lessons so that we could look at them. We coded them. We've done multiple rounds of coding with them. And we observed some practices that are promising. If they can be refined and maybe more widely implemented, we feel that they could make an impact on the effectiveness of instruction in these large classes. So I'm going to share a total of 7 lesson clips, and talk about the effective practices we observed. In this first clip, we're going to see how a teacher copes with the lack of school materials.
Adrienne, I don't think we have the sound. I know it worked in the test, but we don't seem to have it this time. I'm not sure if you could repeat that again, and maybe our IT can help.
Okay, hold on. Let me go back to my apologies. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to try to reshare. I shared it the exact same way.
Yeah, I saw that it did work, so not sure what's happened there.
So optimize for motion and video. My apologies. I assumed it was working. I didn't think to ask. I may have missed a button. Let's try that again. And I will replay this video. My apologies. Can you hear it now?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Yes. Now I chose this video because it's obviously at the beginning where the person collecting the video didn't know exactly where to sit and was trying to get situated. But I chose it because this is a really rare print-rich classroom. And I wanted you to see how it's not just the stuff that you see at the front, but there are items strung all over the classroom. And the teacher made materials. They're very creative. They're everywhere. Surprisingly, they're even pasted to the walls. And so as we train teachers to use these materials, we have to carefully consider what happens in that classroom when the teacher's not present. We have to ask questions like, will the materials be destroyed? Will they be removed? Is the room locked? What is the school culture regarding materials? Like, are children taught to respect them? Or if they go in and destroy them, is it not a big deal? So I think all of those things kind of lead into, we always tell people, or we tell teachers, hey, just paste it on the wall or just do that. But there might be other circumstances around why they're not able to do that in their classrooms. And it has to do with like, what's the school culture and the safety of the room after they leave? Or do they teach in the same place every day? This is a really great example of a print-rich classroom, and we were so pleased to see it. Oops. So I want to talk about classroom routines also. When learners understand what's expected of them, and they're trained to use these efficient routines, teachers are better able to manage the behavior and provide effective instruction because they know where the children should be. The children know where the children should be, and everybody understands what's going on in the classroom. And although occasionally it might look like chaos, it's controlled chaos. So we're going to watch clips from two different lessons to see different ways that these two teachers use routines. So some teachers use songs to cue a specific routine and others use claps and instruction. Here we see grade 2 students that you can tell they've practiced this routine. They might not know it 100%. Some of them kind of acted like they didn't know what to do, but they obviously were familiar with the process of pair up, 2 by 2s. They knew they had to find a pair, and they were all really actively trying to please the teacher and do what they were supposed to do. Okay, and now this next one, I'll let you look at it yourself. Okay, how many man that? How you know kuna leta kale magulu kama kumau bila magulu. Now, to an untrained eye, that might have looked like chaos, but this is 112 grade 2 children, and it took them less than a minute to get up, get their learning materials, move into groups, and start working. So this teacher has trained those students to use this routine and to use it very efficiently. Um, I'm very impressed by this teacher. I think she did an incredible job of getting those students into the process of how do they learn, how do they learn efficiently, how do they move transition between activities and move from whole group into this small group. In a 40-minute lesson, every minute counts. And like I said, I timed it. It took them less than a minute to get from the time they got up to the time they were engaging into their next activity. Let's talk about concept development and language development. So when I talk about concept development, I refer to the way in which a teacher guides the learners through creative and critical thinking about the topic being taught. Language development is incredibly important, and I know that you know this, but I'm a literacy person, so I have to reiterate, because oral language is our foundation for literacy. Our oral language is our foundation for second language development. Our oral language is our foundation for concept development. So I just want you to look at how she develops both the concept and their language and moving into independent work.
These sentences together. We are going to read these sentences together. Say, anywhere. We have learned the meanings of the words and making sentences using the words given. Yes? Yes. Zimene timaphunzira msiku la lero. Kali mfunzo. Thank you very much. Ndeko bana ndikufuna ugire ntchito iyi undipangire chiganizo chako chisafanane ndi changa. Izi ndi zanga eri ndeweyo undipangire chako chimodzi pogwiritsa ntchito mawu oti save the email. Ugwiritse ntchito mawu oti save the email. Alexandre Bendisolembera, I want you to write your own sentence using the word save and email. Your sentence must be different from mine. Chiganizo yako chikalesiyana ndi changa. Ndione wamaliza ndani. Okay.
So this teacher does use a higher order creative thinking activity because she's asking the learners to create unique sentences. You may have also noticed that in this English class, the teacher used translanguaging practices to intentionally support English development with the Chichewa language. She moved back and forth between Chichewa and English, explaining what the students were about to do. Ideally, she would have first engaged the learners in small group or pair discussions to use both Chichewa and English to create and share some new sentences, and then move them into their writing sentences. This practice would have further developed their oral language in both languages and also supported their critical thinking about the vocabulary terms, and then linked that oral language to written language. So let's look at concept development through peer discussion. We'll think about how this supports both concept development and language development. Now, I'm not sure if you picked up on that, but the first part, one partner was talking to the other. Like partner one was talking about what she was asking them to reflect on this picture and what they saw. And then the second part, the second partner was expected to share. When we allow students to engage in free discussion about a topic, it not only supports their concept and oral language development, but improves their interpersonal skills, their critical thinking, and increases student responsibility of the learning process. But this can be difficult for teachers because by doing this, she's handing over the power to the children to do the discussion, and she is no longer the one in control of everything that's happening in the classroom. So this can be a bit of a paradigm shift for some teachers. So when a second teacher, so I want to talk about partnership teaching and concept development. Oftentimes when a second teacher was assigned to the classroom, we observed them just sitting in the back. We think that this has to do with hierarchical power dynamics, so that the lead teacher feels like they're in control of the room. But let's watch these teachers. So throughout this entire lesson, the second teacher that's in the room that you see in the back, she manages behavior, she supports instruction, she helps, excuse me, helps monitor learner engagement.
It's really fascinating to see. I love the term controlled chaos, but the routines that are coming across as controlled chaos, but the degree of discipline and efficiency that those teachers have to use with such minimal time and so much to do, and to hear your reflections, Adrienne, on what you see within that chaos and noise. Sometimes it is actually showing very thoughtful and thought through processes, and just leaves me with a feeling of exhaustion, actually, if those teachers.
But this was an excellent model of like partner teaching, but also providing that hands-on experimentation to support learner autonomy and concept development during this math lesson. So I really wanted to emphasize that. Thank you for holding down the fort there for a moment. Apologies for that. So assessment in large classes is extremely challenging. In some classes, we observe marking taking up more than half of the lesson time, leaving learners just sitting and waiting or misbehaving because they're finished. They were given nothing to do. So teachers have to find really creative and effective ways to conduct assessment and provide feedback while also meeting the assessment expectations of administrators and parents.
Correction.
So this teacher has 224 learners in his class, and every one of those learners want to take home a marked book because that's the way their parents know that the teacher's paying attention to their child. He informed us that he has to rotate around the class and mark different learner books each day. So what he does is strategically mark several books and then has the learners review and check their own work as he goes over some of the mistakes he noted during the selective marking. Um, And so he is able to really focus on targeted learners, focus on different errors that are being made across the class and across the students, and then kind of guide everyone to the correct answer. I know I'm almost out of time. I'm going to share some findings around barriers that teachers identified. So we conducted thematic analysis of focus group discussions and semi-structured interviews, and we learned that most teachers know what the best practices are for effective learning, but experience major barriers to being able to utilize them. 4 major themes that emerged from our research are scarcity, time, space, resources. This amplifies the challenge of large classes. Training. Most of these teachers have not been trained on how to use those strategies in extremely large classes. And honestly, based on like the 25 years of the review of the last 25 years of research, there really isn't empirical evidence on what is most effective out there. Well-being. So educators are often demotivated, undercompensated, unsupported, and feel unrecognized. And then assessment. The assessment requirements are unrealistic. They take huge amounts of instructional time and leave no time for data to drive instruction. So teachers are often expected in a class of 224 to assess every child every week on every skill. So that's just overwhelming for teachers. We have a few, based on our observations and discussions with teachers, we recommend some pedagogical approaches or practices that appear to be promising for helping teachers to provide effective instruction and helping all students have the opportunity to learn. For building a classroom community, emphasizing interpersonal relationships, being aware of learner needs, and engaging learners in conversations with each other and the teacher. And I'll move quickly because I know I'm out of time. Establishing a behavior plan in collaboration with the learners, planning for movement and instruction, developing routines, and engaging in teacher reflection on what works and what needs to be improved. Integrating higher level open-ended questions, redefining active participatory learning as knowledge application rather than call and response or rote memorization. And then focusing on feedback that leads to a correct answer or a solution process for the learners. And then finally, focusing on language as the foundation of learning, not just learning, but learning concepts, learning second language skills, and learning critical thinking skills. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing what our discussants have to say.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. That's really such a rich study, and thank you so much for sharing that.